Good morning, students. I hope you are well. Today we're going to be talking about Viking raiders and traders. And in order to raid and trade, the Vikings had to have these wonderful ships. They were wonderful shipbuilders. Sort of amazing. Before we do that, during today's read aloud, you will hear some vocabulary you need to be sure of. Archers are people who shoot bows and arrows. To maneuver is to move skillfully. Reluctantly, to do something in an unwilling or unenthusiastic manner. A serpent is a snake, and valiant, to be valiant is to be brave and courageous. Little background information. Let's take a look at this poster. And you can see three different types of ships that the Vikings used. People in the Viking age used. Why were ships important to these folks? Well, they relied on ships. It was their mode of transportation. Due to Scandinavians' proximity to rivers and the sea, the Viking age people, the Norsemen, used these bodies of water for fishing and for traveling. And what kind of ship will Tali and Bjorn be traveling in on their way to Iceland? They will go in a Cunard, a cargo ship. This is a cargo ship. Has a square sail. And you can see it's wide. It's wider than this ship, which happens to be a drakkar. It's a long ship. Both of these larger boats have a mast to hold their sail up. They have rudders. There are oars on the side of this one. I don't see oars except for this, rudder here. There might have been oars. There are oar slots up here, but not as many as for a warship. The cargo ship relied mostly upon its sail to move. The prow of the ship is the front. So there are three different types of ships displayed here. The cargo ship or Cunard. This is the long ship. The long ship is the warship. It's a drakkar. And then there's a rowboat. This is like the family car. You'd go get in your fairing when you needed to go from one little place to another, but it was not seaworthy. It would be a dink around the edges of the land to go from one spot to another, to go get your family meals, to meet folks. It doesn't carry a lot of people. So just taking your family goods from one place to another, going to the grocery store and coming home is what you would do in your fairing. Had enough space to just store your family goods. The long ship was indeed long and narrow. This shape allowed Vikings to travel quickly. And here I'm using the word Vikings as warriors. People going Viking, raiding, would go in a long ship, a drakkar. Why would it be important that if you're going Viking, you would be able to sail quickly in a long ship? Well, they wanted to be able to surprise people that they were raiding. They didn't want people to have a lot of forewarning that they were coming, and they wanted to be able to get away quickly. There are oar ports on the side of the ship that allowed more direction for them, and they could move more quickly until the wind filled up their sails in order to move. A large warship had about 40 oars. The biggest known warship had 50 or more oars. Okay, so a warship, longship, drakkar. Cargo ship, Cunard. You can see that it is wider. And look, it's got a place for animals in the middle of this ship. I think that's very interesting. Cargo ships had fewer oar ports and relied more on their sails to move. We will talk more about these ships later, but I just want you to know you've got the family rowboat, the fairing, the longship, the Drakkar. This is the warship. And then the cargo ship, which could carry many people and lots of cargo. But you'll see it's just as open. It didn't have a hold down in the bottom, the way we think of a lot of ships to hold their cargo. Their cargo sat on the deck and was covered. Here's Bjorn, his family, Tolly, going down to the longships. And here they are. Let's start our new story. Remember that this story is being told in the first person by Bjorn. So we're going to know his thoughts and feelings really well because he'll be able to explain those to us. As we crept through the darkness, the sound of animated voices moved through the chill evening air. It soon became clear that there were several men on board the dragon-headed longship. Tolly scuttled forward and then crouched down beside the prow of the ship. The prow is at the front. It's the part of the ship that cuts through the water. I followed, keeping close to him. In the darkness, the torchlight from the ship cast a shadowy glow across the carved dragon head. It was hard not to imagine that this ferocious beast was real. And as lamplight flickered across its face, I couldn't help thinking that it was actually staring at us. I had often heard stories of how the sight of a fleet of Viking longships with their square sails and prows carved into serpents or dragons sent shivers down the spines of people in other lands. "They're Viking warriors," whispered Tolly. "It sounds like they are getting ready to go on a raid." We continued to listen to the men talking, and it soon became clear that one voice in particular stood out from the rest. "Let's peek over the edge," pleaded Tolly. "No, it's too dangerous," I replied instinctively. "We're not supposed to be here." "Come on, Bjorn," urged Tolly. I think Lord Toki is on board the ship." Lord Svein was the ruler of our kingdom. His cousin, Lord Toki, was his closest friend. So if Lord Svein was the ruler and his cousin was a Lord Toki, are they a jarl, a carl, or a thrall? They would be a jarl. They would be like the patricians. Lord Toki was known to be a fierce warrior who had led many successful raids in lands across the ocean. The people of my kingdom respected him as an honorable and loyal lord. But these were not good times for us. The king of a neighboring land, King Harold, had decided that King Svein was now his most hated enemy, and there had already been several armed confrontations between our two kingdoms. The constant fighting was the reason Tolly and I were being encouraged to leave our homeland for good. "Come on, Bjorn, let's see what's happening," Tolly said. "Okay, but just for a few seconds," I said reluctantly. We carefully peered over the edge of the ship. Fortunately, our heads were barely visible. Right away, I noticed the ship was full of Vikings and weapons. My heart raced, and I whispered to Tolly, "They're going to see us. Let's go." I stepped away from the ship, but Tolly continued to take in the scene. I began counting, and when I reached 10, I pulled Tolly away from the edge, despite his wiggling in protest. We both crouched down again in the darkness, trying hard not to breathe too loudly. And then, without warning, Tolly grabbed my shoulder and pulled me farther along the wharf. He stepped quickly yet softly into an empty rowboat, bobbing up and down in the water about 20 feet away from the warship. And then he pulled me in after him. I was right. Lord Toki is talking to the men about his plan to return to England Ireland and the islands in the sea surrounding them. There's good farmland there, as well as forests and rivers. There's wealth there, too. The chieftains there have silver, jewelry, glassware, and slaves. The warriors have been told to seize as much of this as they can. However, it seems there is a powerful chieftain who killed many of our warriors the last time Lord Toki was there, Tolly explained. Tomorrow at dawn, 10 more warships will join them. Bjorn, I wish we could go with them. I wish we could be Vikings. Remember, the warriors were the people who were called Vikings. I looked at Tolly's eager face, and I wasn't so sure I was ready to be a warrior. I wasn't fearful of war or armed combat. From a very early age, boys in my town were trained to be soldiers. In fact, I was known to be one of the most skillful archers in our town. And just like all Norse, I believed it would be a great honor to die in the battle as a Viking. I just wasn't sure I would be valiant enough to please the mighty gods Odin and Tyr. I had been told that if there was even an ounce of fear in a warrior's heart, he would not be welcomed into Valhalla. Our parents have decided that we are to settle in Iceland, I replied. Our turn to fight will come soon enough, I repeated my mother's words. That's what she said to me when, at an early age, I wanted to know when I would become a Viking warrior. This raiding party is well armed, continued Tolly. Besides bows and arrows, the men have battle axes, swords, spears, and daggers. I believe I even saw some berserkers. Berserkers were fierce Vikings, so they were even more fierce warriors than regular warrior, who worked themselves up into a battle frenzy. They were said to be unable to be harmed by weapons when in this state. The phrase going berserk, which means going crazy, comes from this age. I glanced up at the woolen sail that had already been raised. Tolly was right. These warriors intended to set off at first light. Grandfather Afi had once explained that it was our ships that had helped to make our people so powerful. I knew that our warships were designed to be long, sleek, and fast. Despite their size, they were light and had a shallow interior and a steering oar. I had grown up listening to warriors tell stories of their journeys in these warships. They would describe in great detail how our ships sailed like magical creatures through the mighty waters of the Western Sea. When they were close to land, the warriors would use the oars to steer the ships closer to the shore. Our biggest warships needed 40 oars to steer them. The ability to switch from sailing to rowing allowed the men to maneuver their ships onto flat beaches or into narrow waterways. Once there, the men would jump out of the ships and strike fear into the hearts and minds of all who encountered them. These lightning-fast raids on undefended towns and monasteries yielded great wealth for us. Monasteries are places where monks live, men who devote their lives to their religious faith. Suddenly, the silence of our night was broken by a raucous sound of the men on the longships, slotting their wooden shields into the shield rack that ran along the side of the ship. It appeared that the men had finished talking and now intended to sleep on the ship in preparation for their early departure. Tolly, we should go, I said urgently. Okay, said Tolly reluctantly. I would do anything to be going with them, though, he said sadly. You are coming to Iceland with me. Now let's get going before Grandfather Afi comes looking for us, I said firmly. And with that, we stepped out of the rowboat and onto the wharf. Crouching down in the darkness, I said, on the count of 3. Then we ran like the wind back to our home. Is that quickly or slowly? Mm-hmm. Is that literal or non-literal language? You're right. What is a Viking longship? Well, a Viking longship is a type of ship, has square sails, prows often carved into serpents or dragons. It is a fast ship, shallow ship. The purpose is for as a warrior raiding ship. Why were they preferred over a cargo ship for raiding? Well, they were easy to maneuver because they had sails and oars. Long, sleek, light, quiet, and fast. Where are these warriors in this chapter planning to go for their raid? They're planning to go to England, Ireland, and the islands in the sea surrounding them. What other places did the Vikings travel to go in their cargo ships and longships? Well, obviously they went to Iceland, Greenland, Newfoundland, and the surrounding areas. Why are Bjorn and Tali being encouraged to leave their homeland? Well, there is constant fighting going on in their homeland between King Svein, the King Bjorn and Tali's homeland, and King Harold, the king of a neighboring land. Tali is eager to be a Viking. Do you think Bjorn feels the same way? Why or why not? It seems as though Bjorn is reluctant and not as eager as Tali to be a warrior, even though he's one of the most skilled archers in town. Bjorn worries that he might not be valiant enough to please the gods. He's afraid he might not be brave enough. He might fear a little in his heart. He even says to Tali, "Our turn to fight will come soon enough." What did the Viking warriors think of their warships? They were proud and thought they were like magical creatures. What do you think a non-Viking would think of a Viking warship? Well, their warships were designed to strike fear into the hearts and minds of all who encountered them, and I think that's what people would fear. They would see a Viking ship and they would know that there was a battle at hand. What are some things that Vikings are proud of? Think about that for a while. What are some things that Vikings are proud of? We've learned about several of them in our read aloud today. And I will leave you with that this morning. I hope you have a great day.